And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I see our participant numbers are ticking up, so I will just give it a few more minutes for folks to log on to the session before we go ahead and kick it off. But we are very excited that you are joining us today. We have an awesome group of panelists lined up to speak, and we're really looking forward to hearing from them. So I'll just start in 1 more minute at 8:02 Eastern time. So until then, get a cup of water or coffee to drink, and we'll be with you shortly. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's joining us. On behalf of the young professionals at the U.S. Agency for International Development, otherwise known as YPID, I would like to welcome you all to the first ever TEDx style showcase of young professionals, co-hosted with the Society for International Development's Young Professional Network. My name is Madison Cullinan, and I am the social chair of the YPID Employee Resource Group. My partner, Joseph Zorikong, the co-chair of the YPN at SID-US, along with YPID's executive board and the SID-YPN event planning staff team. A lot of people have been working over the past 2 months to plan this event, and we're so excited to spend this morning, afternoon, or evening with you. Before we dive in, I'd like to briefly share with you all about what YPID is. We are an employee resource group of over 1,000 young professionals working at the U.S. Agency for International Development in Washington, as well as in numerous posts overseas. Our social events, professional development opportunities, and advocacy efforts seek to empower and support the community of young staff at the agency. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Joseph, to talk about SID-YPN.
And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Joseph Zorikong. And just a quick note about SID-US YPN. So the YPN is the Young Professionals Network. It's a collaborative space within the Society of International Development US for young professionals interested in working in international development. Today, we're really excited to hear from several young professionals working to advance localized, inclusive initiatives in the international development sector. They'll showcase their self-selected topic through these TEDx-style presentations. And we really hope that you gain new insights into the fascinating and really important work of your peers and colleagues. But before we go on, I'd like to highlight a few housekeeping items. So the session today is actually going to be recorded, and it'll be shared publicly through our various networks and social media channels. Secondly, there's a closed captioning option that's available to you through Zoom. So if you want to take a quick minute, if need be, I would recommend that you turn that on. And please note, so we're not going to have a Q&A session for this, which is actually true to typical TEDx style presentations. But if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to sort of reach out to us after the event. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the first presentations today. So Lauren and Ahram will be presenting on youth-led research on the education to employment transition in Senegal. Guys, take it away.
Great. Can you hear us? Is our cam visible as well?
Yes, we can see you both.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Grubel with USAID in Senegal.
And I am Aram Gaysen with Social Change Factory, a Senegalese youth-led organization that works in social innovation and youth empowerment in Africa.
Senegal, like many other African countries, has a very young population. 70% of the country is under the age of 35. This young population brings many strengths: a vibrant workforce, innovation, new ideas. However, when youth don't see opportunities to harness their potential, the consequences can be devastating. Senegal has experienced this over the past few years. The rising cost of living and growing unemployment rate have disproportionately affected young people. In fact, 60% of all unemployed people in Senegal are under the age of 32. And unemployment is one of the main reasons Senegalese youth consider making the dangerous migrant journey to Europe. In March 2021, all of this came to a head with historic and violent youth protests. These protests woke up the government and international organizations like USAID and forced us to reflect on how effective we truly are in addressing the needs of youth. At USAID, we noticed there was a unique challenge for university graduates. Senegalese youth who graduated from university were more likely to be unemployed than their peers who did not finish high school. This high unemployment rate among university graduates is due to a number of factors: a mismatch between subjects students are studying at university, namely social sciences, and the demands of the labor market, lack of career counseling, and limited jobs in the formal sector. In fact, 70% of jobs in Senegal are in the informal sector. At the same time, Senegal has one of the largest number of higher education institutions in Francophone West Africa, with youth from throughout the region traveling to Senegal to study at the numerous universities and vocational training institutions. We wanted to understand more about how the higher education system in Senegal is working. Are universities preparing students to search for jobs? If so, how? Are they engaging the private sector? Are they adapting the curriculum to the demands of the labor market? We knew that much of this information was not available publicly. That is where Aram and her organization, Social Change Factory, came in. At USAID, we wanted to ensure that youth were central to the research effort into the experience of university students and graduates. The evidence is clear that when youth are engaged in issues that affect them, especially when they lead the effort, the results will be more accurate and youth are more likely to buy into and feel represented in the findings. Aram, are you on mute?
At Social Change Factory, we have nearly 10 years of experience with youth-led research on various subjects. Youth-led research is an integral part of Social Change Factory approach. We work with and for young people. We have worked with youth in Senegal and West and Central Africa and have consulted more than 5,000 young people across 14 countries of the region on the themes of self-protection, discrimination, and gender. All of these activities have been carried out by young people. Youth-led research not only improves the quality of the data collected, but also improves the leadership capabilities of the youth leaders themselves, building stronger relationships with members of their communities, leaders, and with elders. When we first started working with USAID to investigate this phenomenon of unemployment and underemployment of university graduates in Senegal, we first assembled a group of youth researchers to host focus group with different cohorts of university students. We engaged students in training who had just arrived at the university, students at the end of their university career, recently graduated students who are looking for a job, and recent graduating who just starting their first job. Across this focus group, We ask for opinions on the content of the university studies and the obstacle encountered in finding a job or an internship, experiences in the search for a job or an internship, and their expectation after graduating versus the reality of the field. We also organize key informant interviews with the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Professional Training, university leaders, and private sector companies. These interviews, led by the youth researchers, supplemented the information we received from the university students. Across the interviews, we heard examples of unemployment and underemployment faced by university graduates. There is a common perception that the social capital of the students matters more than their degree when searching for a job. As a result, young graduates often look for part-time jobs that are not necessarily directly related to their fields of study, as bricklayers, waiters, or call centers employees. One extreme example was shared by students from Gaston Berger University in the region of Saint Louis of Senegal. They struggled to find a full-time job in their field, and they started working as day laborer in a tomato factory that pays only $2 a day, even though they have bachelor or master degrees. Some of the students ended up working in these low-paying jobs permanently. However, when young people are given the opportunity to participate in high-level decision-making spaces, they have the opportunity to hold governments accountable and inform national and international debates on the issues of youth employability and unemployment with a unique perspective. Our aim is also to help establish the youth researchers' credibility and lay the foundation for continuous dialogue between decision makers and young people. It also empowers youth as solution seekers. I believe it also helps vulnerable participants feel safer and more comfortable to speak freely.
Thanks, Aram. What this experience has taught us is that there is always an opportunity to engage youth. And more importantly, we should engage youth as integral stakeholders when we are designing research or programs about them. Tackling youth unemployment and the efficacy of the higher education system will take a multifaceted approach, one that engages the government, private sector, universities, and development partners. Most importantly, youth voices must be at the center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren and Aram, and it really resonates with me that there's always an opportunity to engage youth, and I really appreciate your case study on kind of Senegal for us today. Really great insights. I'm now going to pass it to my colleague Sam, who will be presenting on locally led project development support.
Hello, everyone. Please give me 1 second. Malivak, would you mind pulling up the PowerPoint presentation? Zoom is not allowing me to add it. Thanks. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Wonderful, thank you. So when large international companies enter a new industry or region, they often spend thousands or millions of dollars on market generation and segmentation, product testing, and advertisement just to end up leaving the market within a couple of years because they try to bring an outsider's business and implementation approach to a unique area. Meanwhile, time and time again, well-intentioned implementing organizations have tried to transport the key elements of their success to new contexts, only to find that the results don't materialize. Often the common denominator behind potential success and a potential failure is how well the implementing organization understands local context, a challenge that can be mitigated or completely overcome by empowering local actors to leverage their knowledge and ingenuity to achieve success. Many of my co-presenters will touch on some of the incredible work from local actors and organizations and the benefits that international development organizations get from actively engaging with them. I want to focus specifically on the innovative capacity of these organizations. And I'm lucky to get a front row seat to their incredible and innovative work as a portfolio manager with the Development Innovation Ventures team. Development Innovation Ventures, or DIV for short, is USAID's open innovation fund that invests in breakthrough solutions to some of the world's toughest development challenges. DIV provides grant funding to test new ideas, build evidence of what works, and scale solutions that can impact millions of lives at a fraction of the usual cost. One of the many benefits of the way DIV approaches grants is identifying and providing risk-tolerant funding to local actors around the world to support their innovations. So what do? We combine approaches from different fields to help us identify the best ideas and figure out the right amount of support to provide them. We draw from venture capital by taking a portfolio approach and providing tiered funding that matches the amount of risk involved. We take relatively small high-risk bets on early-stage innovations and invest large amounts of money in later-stage innovations that are better able to demonstrate impact. This approach aims to maximize the social impact of the overall portfolio. And then we draw from the academic peer review process, seeking reviews from experts inside and outside of USAID to identify the most promising solutions. DIV is rigorously focused on results. Once beyond proof of concept, we require innovators to demonstrate rigorous evidence of impact to ensure that we're scaling to only those approaches that generate impact. If the intervention doesn't have this evidence in hand, we'll fund research testing the impact and cost effectiveness of solutions. So how does this support localization? Combining these approaches allows DIV to serve as an open door to USAID, including providing an opportunity for new and local partners that may not qualify for funding from other parts of the agency to get their first foot in the door. We accept applications for innovations in any country in any sector in which USAID works, and we accept those applications 24/7, 365. And we define innovation broadly as a creative solution to any development problem. So this can include things like new technology, behavioral science approaches, replications of proven interventions in new contexts, and so forth. Essentially, what we're looking for is solutions that can achieve development outcomes better, faster, cheaper than relevant alternatives. Importantly, we support all types of applicants too, which really helps to drive localization. So we include social entrepreneurs, nonprofit organizations, researchers, private sector companies, and so on. And DIV's evidence-tiered funding model and core principles allow us to build some structure into our open door approach. And this design really works. An analysis of our early work found that DIV generated $17 in social benefit for every dollar spent. So a little bit more about that tiered funding and those principles. So first, in tier funding, we provide funding in 3 different stages. In stage 1, pilot funding, we provide up to $200,000 to support post-prototype innovations that are ready to be piloted in a developing country. Stage 2, testing and positioning for scale, we provide up to $1.5 million to further test innovations that prove successful during piloting, often using this time to gather evidence of rigorous impact. And stage 3 is for scaling, and we'll provide up to $15 million to support the expansion or replication of proven innovations into new contexts. Next slide. DIV uses 3 core principles to assess applicants. The first one is rigorous evidence of impact. DIV heavily prioritizes the importance of rigorous evidence generation in order to demonstrate what works and what doesn't. DIV looks for different indicators of impact depending on the stage of the intervention and provides funding that matches accordingly. DIV relies on evidence and funds research to test new solutions, development challenges. Many of our grantees conduct randomized control trials or RCTs to meet this criteria, though these are not always required. The second criteria is cost effectiveness. DIV invests in solutions that demonstrate the potential to deliver maximum impact for every dollar. We take a best-in-class approach to cost effectiveness, investing in funding solutions that can prove they are better, faster, or cheaper than their respective alternatives. We are not expecting them to meet this criterion at the time of the award, but look for clear indicators that they may be the most cost-effective solution as they scale. And then finally, our last criterion is the potential to scale. DIV supports solutions that demonstrate the potential to scale to improve millions of lives within 10 years. DIV recognizes that innovations can take a variety of pathways to scale, but expects that they will be financially sustainable and ultimately grow without continued DIV support. So all these elements combine to allow DIV to achieve extraordinary results. Since our founding in 2010, DIV has received over 13,000 applications, which demonstrates a clear demand for the type of funding that DIV provides. And we funded 277 of those innovations. Notably, these solutions are spread across 49 different countries in nearly every region of the world, and 50%, half of our innovators, are new to USAID. And I think that last point is the clearest demonstration of how DIV supports localization. An open approach to innovation is complementary with localization. Those closest to the problem have a good sense of what the solutions might be, they understand the context, and they are likely to have the relationships and partnerships needed to bring an intervention to scale. Working with DIV has helped open the door to USAID to local organizations and supported them to get substantial international funding. And these awards have real impact. Innovations supported by DIV have been rigorously demonstrated to significantly improve the lives of over 99 million people globally. To illustrate the type of impact that DIV's funding can provide, I just want to highlight a couple of our grantees that are doing great work in exemplifying the locally led development that DIV so often supports. Next slide. So the first one is Ampersand. Ampersand is an e-moto company and DIV grantee that is a new, non-traditional, and locally established partner. Having seen the carbon impact of diesel bodas, which are essentially motorcycle taxis, on the local environment in Rwanda, Ampersand's founders saw the potential to electrify the vehicles by designing battery-operated e-motos and developing the requisite charging stations to ensure drivers can access a network of fuel sources. Ampersand applied for DIV funding to help catalyze their deployment of e-motos and charging stations. And over the course of their award, they did just that. Although our milestones only required reaching 200 e-motos on the road, Ampersand successfully deployed 800 bikes in 2022, with plans to add thousands more this year. They have supported these bodas with a network of 17 swap stations in Rwanda and Kenya. And one advantage contributing to Ampersand's growth is their knowledge of that local environment, an investment in building bikes and batteries that fit the geography and context. And DIV was able to provide early risk-tolerant funding to help them establish themselves, attract additional funding, and expand into new markets. Next slide. Another way that DIV supports localization is through helping local organizations adapt proven solutions to their local context. Protham, an Indian NGO, has won multiple DIV grants, including ones to develop and scale the well-renowned teaching at the right level model in India and sub-Saharan Africa. It has generated significant rigorous evidence of effectiveness. DIV originally supported Protham to test different models of teaching in the right level in India in 2013. Then in 2017, equipped with evidence of what works, DIV supported JPAL South Africa, Protham, UNICEF, and the Ministry of Education to adapt teaching at the right level for national scale across Zambia. Most recently, Youth Impact, a Botswana-based organization, has taken up teaching at the right level there with DIV support. There, they are testing how variations of teaching at the right level perform in Botswana while maximizing impact and cost effectiveness. They plan to support the government of Botswana to scale teaching at the right level to 1.2 million students in all of its primary schools by 2025. We're thrilled to see and support different local actors taking up this highly cost-effective solution to improve the learning outcomes of children around the world. And these are just a couple of examples of the innovative local organizations that DIV has supported over a decade plus of work. We strive to continue to support these great innovators as they find incredible solutions to the challenges their communities face. DIV remains an open door to fund local actors, and I would highly encourage your networks to apply and get involved. We are always looking for the next great innovation. Thank you.
Well, that's really incredible, Sam. It's so cool to learn about, DIV's tailored and efficient approach towards scaling successful development outcomes. And so I'd like to introduce the next presenter, Katerina, who will be presenting on using a locally and Ukrainian-led approach to assessing the impact of the full-scale Russian invasion on the Ukrainian secondary education system. Katerina?
Thanks a lot, Joseph. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Today, I'll share a story about what it is like behind the scenes when conducting an assessment of the impact of the full-scale Russian invasion on Ukrainian secondary education system. It may seem from the topic that this talk is about results of our research, but it's not. And if I lost you here and you now want to go grab some coffee, that's okay. But please know that at the end of March, there will be a 1-hour presentation with all of the details and a Q&A session. But yes, for today's speech, I thought it would be more informative to talk about how we did the work, as there are really impressive things outside of a graph. I started my current job on a USAID-funded project called Unity just before the invasion. The project is implemented by IREX in partnership with other really inspiring organizations like Building Ukraine Together, Center for CSR Development, Zinc Network, International Republican Institute, and of course, Making Sense International. Shout out to my amazing team for Making Sense who is supporting me today. I'm really thankful for that. So what is Unity? First of all, it's a very important and powerful word itself. As the name of the project, its capital letters stand for Ukrainian national identity through use. What attracted me a lot when applying for this job was the slogan, working with youth, not just for youth. As a young person, I was really happy to see that. Young people definitely inspire each other, but it's kind of cool that in Unity, we also inspire those who are actually older in helping us to access improved economic and skills building opportunities, to take leadership roles in civil society, to contribute the community-based problem solving, lead the change, and to support the common values we all share regardless of age: human rights, democratic principles, and equity. It's kind of remarkable that I am now sitting in a place where a year ago on February 24th, I learned that Russia invaded my home country, Ukraine, and Kyiv, where I peacefully lived my whole life, is at risk. That night, my bed was right here near the window. When I woke up from the call, I didn't even answer. For me, it was an obvious sign that the full-scale war started, as people of my age and circle do not make calls, especially at 4 a.m. So imagine yourself, you have your first onboarding meeting at your first ever full-time job. Everything seems to be great. And the next day, the so-called world's second most powerful army invades your country. And you find yourself on a 16-hour car ride that looks like a traffic jam from Washington, D.C. to New Haven, thinking, okay, we probably are not going to do any educational boot camps for youth entrepreneurs now. We pivoted and did a lot of other things in Unity. And the assessment I'm going to talk about today is only one locally led example. During that 16-hour car ride to somewhere safe on February 24th, which I mentioned earlier, I was not only thinking about educational boot camps for entrepreneurs, of course. I was really angry. I was angry that extremely bright minds the same age as I am, and even younger, would go into the war as soldiers to defend our future. I will always respect that, but that day I was so angry. I tell you this because most Ukrainians, especially youth, were trying to process what was happening as best as they could, and we still are. Before the full-scale war started, each implementing partner had different plans for engaging and empowering youth, and young people were interested in other, definitely non-military goals. Assessing the impact of the full-scale Russian invasion on the Ukrainian secondary education system was a vital study activity to help in making informed decisions about future curriculum, teaching strategies, assessment methods, and understanding the actual needs of Ukrainian teachers, students, and the secondary education system itself. The best way this assessment could be conducted was by those who had a real deep understanding of the local context and were best positioned to identify the specific challenges faced by the secondary education system in Ukraine. It had to be Ukrainian school students living through this war, as this is their reality every day. So we gathered a group of youth researchers from all across Ukraine, real insiders on the problem we are trying to understand, and a huge inspiration. In training activities and weekly check-in meetings, we were teaching them about the logic of sociological research, positive use development, sharing knowledge about the instruments we are going to use to collect data, reviewing questions for upcoming focus group discussions together, and of course, listening to their insights. However, conducting research in a war zone is no easy feat. We faced and overcame numerous challenges that I truly recognized when preparing for this speech. First of all, it's important to admit the unique experience that researchers face in this context. The Russian war against Ukraine is unique as all events are being shared online in real time, and young people like me were in this information bubble on Instagram, Twitter, messengers, and even TikTok 24/7. Even every time something is happening in our territories, we are absorbed by the news. Your own neighborhood can immediately become a part of a news story, and this context of being relatively safe sometimes determines the ability to do even the most simple things. We always had backup plans for our back plans. Secondly, we adopted an inclusive approach involving those most directly affected by the war in a secondary education system. That were students and teachers, and they were our main source of knowledge during online focus group discussions we held in Zoom. The problem is that we started conducting online focus groups when the power supply situation in Ukraine was at its worst. So each time I was very nervous if everyone who promised to join our Zoom call will actually join. And you know what? We had focus group participants living 12 miles from Russia and joining during power deficiency using mobile connection. Just imagine that. And I should say that it was something that paid off for everyone. I remember when, after our first focus group with teachers, we had a very nice moment at the end of our session when two of our youth researchers came off mute and on the video to thank the teachers and share how much they learned from the experiences they shared. For us, the students and teachers were the real experts. We all learned so much from them. We saw that youth focus group participants were coming to our meetings with notes. Some of them were last-minute guests sharing that the electricity supply schedule changed, but they were still willing to participate. They were asking if there will be more focus group discussions and shared that while participating, they felt that their experience and thoughts are meaningful. After our discussions, I was receiving supportive and thankful messages from teachers, students who just participated, and fun fact, even from their family members. My favorite was from Anastasia, taking care of her siblings. She wrote, "I don't know what you were doing, but my sister was so delighted yesterday." And I remind you, we were only talking about what it is like studying in war conditions. It was clear that these meetings were an outlet for the participants. In almost every case, our focus groups ran over the allotted 90 minutes. People had so much to say. They wanted to talk about all the things that happened to them. And they seemed very committed and determined to tell us about their experience, to share recommendations, and everything that could probably help us in this research. Until you live through a war, you cannot fully understand the amount of pent-up emotions that we lived with. My anger did not go away after that 16-hour car ride. There were so many things to be angry about each day after. I was angry because my friends that are managing different social media pages had a new task: to write death notice posts about members of our communities who passed away on the front line. I was angry because I knew people that already lost their homes in 2014 after Crimea and Donetsk, Luhansk regions were occupied. And every day there were more and more homes being lost. I was angry because someone put my phone number on a website for providing support to people suffering from war. And I was angry because I wasn't able to provide the support it was promised on that website. In most situations, I was angry that I only have colorful outwear and it feels inappropriate to stand in a red puffer at a funeral. I was angry these last days when preparing for this presentation because at a certain moment, all my feelings were muted. I just accepted everything and focused on other things. Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, wrote, "The first to break were those who believed that everything would end soon. Then those who didn't believe it would ever end. The ones that survived were those who focused on their affairs without waiting for something else to happen. The impact of war is really hard to digest, but when using a locally led approach, we're creating a space for all participants, teachers, students, youth researchers, to be mindful of what they experience, feel, and think, and to provide perspective to keep the focus on their affairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katerina, for your really personal account. And I know this is kind of a heavier presentation, so I'll just give folks a minute to kind of process all that Katerina said before we transition to our next presentation. But sincerely, thank you so much, Katerina, for joining us today. And I know you talked about, internet connectivity being an issue, and even for our presentation, we were, cautious that you may not be able to join today, but so glad that you did and you could be with us live. So thank you again. Our next presenter that I will transition to is Mia, and Mia will be presenting on mediation, escalation, and cooperation, a young professional's work in the Middle East.
All right. Thank you, Madison. And also thank you, Katerina, for sharing your story. That was really beautiful. So hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen with you. All right, so here's my talk, as Madison already spoke about, mediation, escalation, and cooperation, about my time working within the Middle East. So on May 11th, 2021, I sent this personal text message to my sister. It says, "Hi, I'm sorry if I'm overwhelming you." She said, "What's up?" And I sent her the screenshot of this news article that said, "If the enemy persists in bombing civilian towers, then Tel Aviv will have an appointment with a harsh missile strike that exceeds what happened in Ashkelon," a spokesperson for Hamas's armed wing says. And I followed it up by saying, "It might be a long night. I'm just a little scared, but I don't want to show anyone that I'm scared, so I'm telling you." And what proceeded to happen was a long night. At the time, I was getting my master's at Tel Aviv University, and I was living within the dorms. And I spent the night in and out of bomb shelters. So the next morning, I woke up and I sent the following text message to my sister. It's a screenshot of a tweet, and this tweet says, "Americans love tweeting about international conflict without having the slightest clue of what's going on." And I'm sharing with you these personal messages because I think it highlights my first and my second reaction to what it was like to live in an active conflict from someone who had grown up in the US. And the first one was fear and uncertainty, but the second one was that there was obviously a clear disconnect between what Americans were doing overseas versus the people who were living on the ground. And as we continue to improve our localization efforts, it's important that we try to mediate how our perceptions and how, what we're saying, communicating to the world affects our relationships on the ground with our partners. And so I want to talk about what we can do in the United States, or more specifically DC, to improve these relations from thousands of miles away, specifically with partners who are living within active conflict and working in the peace building world. So hi, everyone. My name is Mia Levy. I am a program analyst with USAID in the Executive Secretariat through the Presidential Management Fellows Program. But I'm fairly new to USAID because up until about 6 months ago, I was living in Israel. I was getting my master's at Tel Aviv University in international conflict mediation. I chose to do this because in 2019, there was a major USAID withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza. And I was curious how this was affecting perceptions of USAID, or more importantly, the US in general, to those who were living in the Middle East. And so I went to get my master's, but what I didn't know was that I would end up staying for 2 years and working in the peace building community with Israelis, Jordanians, and Palestinians on different cooperation efforts. And with these organizations I was working with, they were mainly funded or supported by USAID. And so I think we can all acknowledge that the US and the Middle East have extremely different cultures, and we can probably assume how these cultures affect our professional norms. For example, I'd like to talk about that a little bit further through a culture that I really theory that I really love called the cultural dimensions theory, which was introduced by Gert Hofstede. And this theory I have up here right now, it has the idea that you can compare all cultures through these 6 separate ideas: power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And for the purpose of time, because I know we're all very busy, I'm just going to focus on power distance, which is the first one. And so power distance is this idea of how much a society prescribes to traditional power inequalities. How much are we likely to fall in line with the hierarchy and follow it? And so the idea here is that you can see that Israel is ranked 13, while the US is ranked 40. And so power distance affects our professional work ideas as well. For example, Israel, when it has a low power distance, it means that everyone is almost treated as equals within the workspace. An intern is supposed to speak just as much as their manager is at a staff meeting. But additionally, there comes other ideas into it. For example, Israel, when you are working within the company, you're expected to be consulted on all major company decisions. And that if you're not consulted on those decisions, then it's considered a major cultural faux pas, and you'll probably be very unhappy with your workplace. But when you combine that with the collectivist society that is the majority in Israel, then you get this idea that coworkers are less of like professional colleagues and more so friends and families. And this idea of like a work-life balance dichotomy that we really love in the US, it doesn't so much reign true in Israel. And instead, you have this much more intertwined idea. And so a major difference I see here in the American workplace is how we communicate with each other because of our mid-tier power distance. We have this almost hyper-professionalism way of speaking with people or writing emails. We do it in the grammar we choose, in our body language, in our tone of voice. And we do that for 2 reasons. One of it is that we think that it shows respect to the parties that we're talking with. If I'm going to, say, sir, madam, I'm treating you as an equal or almost higher, and it's very important in our culture. But additionally, it also shows how good we are at our job. Because if I showed up to a work meeting in shorts, or if I signed off an email with emojis, then you're going to think that I'm really bad at my job. But in Israel, that might not so much be the case. And so what happens here is this major miscommunication where Israelis view the US as this cold, this distant workforce. And so that creates a lack of trust between the two. And then on the other hand, Americans can have a very warped perception of Israelis in the sense that they see the relaxed work idea as unprofessional and not very good. And that in itself creates a lack of trust as well. And so I think what we can do here to improve our communication efforts, or at least this is what I tried to do when I was working in that workforce, was to reflect the work styles of our counterparts and to be more flexible in the way that we are communicating with each other. And so maybe that means, sending an important work message over WhatsApp, or maybe that means that when we're having a conversation with somebody, we're calling them on the phone and we're asking first, how are your family? How are your friends? Before we dive into something that is much more work related. And so I'd like to go back and talk a little bit about what happened in May of 2021, because right now I'm showing you the USA versus Israel. And I can say to you, it'd be great if we could just reflect the work cultures of our counterparts. But that's not always the case, because when we're working in communities that are in conflict, there's likely more than one culture going on. And we can't say to ourselves, well, let's just adapt the work culture of everybody involved. So I'm showing you right now what happens when we add in a third party, for example, Jordan. And you can see here that Jordan is also very much different than both the US and Israel. And so what we have here is this different work style that we also need to consider. And I think that there's a way that we can do this in a way that we can improve our miscommunication, specifically in times of conflict, by learning from the communities that have been working in this for decades already. So in May of 2021, a 2-week escalation took place And as we know, it's not an uncommon phenomenon in Israel or in Palestine, or wherever you are in the world that's having a conflict. There's rockets and riots and fires and etc. And at the time when this happened in May, I was actually in my first month of an internship with a peace building organization. My boss was a Gazan refugee, and I also had another boss who was an Israeli Jewish man. And you can imagine that when conflict hits, it extremely rises the tensions between the people who are working together that come from, the two sides. So what happened during this May of 2021 conflict was immediately the first priority became the mental health and the physical safety of the people who are working in the peace building world and the participants in the peace building world. And what my coworkers decided to do in this time was to hold Zoom meetings. Granted, we were still in a Corona era, but was to hold Zoom meetings just to have space for people to speak if they wanted to, or to not speak if they wanted to. And that space might have been just Palestinian, just Israeli, or a collaborative one with them both. But all of them held value. And it was to empathize with the different experiences that the other was having. And so, for example, collective vigils were also a very common thing to mourn the people that were being lost. But you would show up to these vigils, even if you were not the one in mourning, to show support for your counterparts, because as I said, you treat them as family and you treat them as friends. And so when these things were neglected, it brought tension to the organization. For example, if something happened in my city and I did not receive a message from a counterpart who lived, 20 miles away across the border, it was seen as a lack of respect. And so I think it's important here to learn how to better interact with our counterparts who are experiencing conflict, although our instinct is to maintain like this really respectful work distance or this call to action idea that we usually have in the US. But instead, we should try to push for a more empathetic viewpoint, specifically within this conflict, right? And to hold space for our counterparts and to make sure to check in on their mental health, and to make sure that we're communicating with them in this very personalized manner. I'm going to stop sharing now. And I want to just say that this talk has been heavily focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but that's not to say that we can expand this to a more global matter, because what I'm trying to say is that when we're working with different communities of conflict, we should reflect the strategies that they're using to work with each other in the way that we also work with them. And in doing so, in conclusion, we can improve our localization efforts and create a more diverse area that is safe and inviting for the people that are involved. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mia. That was incredible. And I think sort of one takeaway that I have is, to better understand like our colleagues and partners globally is simply through, self-reflection and empathy. So really appreciate that. And moving on to our final presentation will be Marian and Ivan, who will be presenting on leveraging inclusive, locally driven MEL approaches for democracy support programs. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Joseph. In 2020, an argument between a local resident and a member of the nearby internally displaced persons community, IDP community, in Syria erupted into violence, drawing in the families of both perpetrators. The man from the IDP community was injured, and authorities arrested the perpetrator, but the family of the arrested man carried out a retaliatory attack against the IDP community in protest of the arrest. Fearing that this could set off a cycle of violence, the IRI-supported Peace Committee intervened proactively, calling a meeting with 50 members of both the IDP and the host communities. In the end, they were able to convince the family of the perpetrator to apologize for both attacks and to pay for the victim's medical costs. And both sides agreed not to retaliate further, with other members of both communities serving as witnesses to guarantee the agreement. My name is Marian Ware, and I'm a Senior Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning, or MEL, specialist at the International Republican Institute, IRI, an international nonpartisan nonprofit organization with a mission to advance democracy worldwide. I'm joined by my colleague, Ivan Tibumania, our regional MEL manager supporting IRI's Africa division from Kampala, Uganda. Today, we're going to share with you how we're building more equitable monitoring, evaluation, and learning practices in the communities where we work, enabling us to achieve, collect, and report meaningful results and changes on the ground, like in the story I just shared from our program working to stand up peace committees in Syria. So, have you ever needed to rely on data provided to you by a local partner organization? Please write yes or no in the chat. I see some yeses already coming in. Okay, great. So thinking of that organization, reflect on how easy was it to get the information or data that you needed? How accurate was the information? To what extent did your organization and local partners have a shared agreement on the importance of the data they were responsible for collecting and reporting? Yes, this is a common experience for individuals working in the international development sector, regardless of where you are. Collecting data about what our projects are achieving can quickly become a challenge. While we see increased recognition that strict procedures and approaches dictated from Washington, D.C. don't always meet partners' needs and approaches globally, there's still room for improvement on the monitoring, evaluation, and learning front, and thinking through how we conceptualize what changes are meaningful and feasible, and how local partners will play a role in gathering data about these changes on the ground. Designing relevant, results-oriented programs that are important to the communities where we work requires a localized, inclusive approach that relies on active, early, ongoing, and equitable partnership with local organizations and communities. Though many recognize this, the international development sector has a lot of work to do to get there.
For example, before I joined IRI, I worked with an international research organization in Uganda. One day, I led a team of enumerators collect data in Bududa, Arua district in Uganda. Part of the questionnaire included behavioral games to assess income and saving decision-making. One would choose heads or tails to win real money in cash or nothing. Then we could toss a 200 shilling coin so that, what is the problem with this now? So for this specific coin, the tail is a fish, and the head is the Uganda coat of arms. So what's wrong with this? Here is the problem. The choice of this specific coin was inappropriate. It lacked local understanding of contextual issues in this district at the time. Because this specific area, there was a myth of people going underground via the lake to get riches, which was considered evil. It was rumored that these people were using a 200 shilling coin, the same coin we were using for our games with the fish symbol, to facilitate this evil practice. Therefore, our choice of this specific coin to be used in this specific area at that specific period led community members to associate our data collection, the behavior game, the money we were giving, and the whole data collection exercise with evil. We were chased away from this village as chicken thieves. Relatedly, in Uganda, most parts, the word local is perceived to be abusive, insulting, commonly used to define things and people of low standards and inferior. Therefore, using such a language with all its innocence and good intentions can be misinterpreted and have detrimental effects on your development work. So think, what other words are you using that are right in your context, but offensive and derogatory in other areas you are working in?
This is a tough reality of international development work. So what can we do to avoid these challenges and instead build equitable, locally driven, and inclusive MEL practices? Our organization has developed an approach that relies on 3 core pillars. The first is using participatory approaches that prioritize ongoing active engagement of partners on MEL. The second is understanding the country context as it relates to inclusion. For instance, they're identifying priority needs for local communities and accordingly meaningful results to work towards and to track. The third is ensuring data collection methods are comfortable, easy to use, and secure. That is to say, leveraging data collection approaches that are appropriate and comfortable for a given population. So what does this look like in practice? Being participatory in our MEL efforts means building partners' ownership of MEL efforts. We leverage numerous practices to do this, enabling us to design and implement more effective programs that meet people where they are and work with them in the direction of where they want to go. Admittedly, we have a long way to go on this front, and it's a journey we're really just beginning. We're constantly learning as we go. Thinking back to the Syria story I shared at the outset, there is a lot baked into being able to achieve and to collect a meaningful result like this. In other words, it takes a lot of ingredients to bake a good cake. While we've certainly baked some less than perfect cakes, Ivan will share some specific practices or ingredients that we've tried out to create more equitable, meaningful partnership around MEL.
So at project design, we build local ownership of monitoring, evaluation, and learning through assessing partner MEL needs. Different partners have different MEL capacities. Therefore, we avoid assumptions about partner MEL capacity and instead conduct MEL capacity assessment. So we can then provide formal and informal MEL capacity training based on the needs and priorities identified. Now, we avoid also, when we're doing that, we avoid just fault finding and looking for partner MEL weaknesses, but rather we also seek to understand strengths and opportunities that we can leverage. Also, we have what we call partner MEL kickoffs. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning approaches and requirements are not universal. Therefore, as the project starts, we encourage partner teams to conduct a MEL kickoff meeting with their partners to communicate IRI and funders' expectations. In addition, these meetings provide an opportunity for our partners to seek clarification, to communicate their fears and expectations as well. For example, during a recent IRI partner meeting in Zimbabwe, one of the partners expressed anxiety about the ability to answer the "so what" question in their report. That is to say, to explain the significance of the results achieved. In response, IRI provided follow-up protocols and templates to track and explain higher results, support them in this. IRI also used this opportunity to collectively review their partner MEL work plans, activity implementation plans, and thus provide timely guidance. But also, we recognize meaningful results. We endeavor to identify meaningful results to our partners and participants and set up realistic ways to track them. We ensure that data collection method chosen are comfortable, easy to use, secure. Remember the coin story? That helps us to avoid such scenarios. We also endeavor to build a MEL culture. We mainstream MEL in procurement processes by setting up simple structures that can highlight MEL as a priority, set shared expectations from the start. For example, IRI has included MEL work plans as part of partner deliverables. This minimizes chances of partners seeing MEL as an additional burden. These are some of the crucial practices as we start up a new project with our partners. From there, of course, we also have practice support partners' MEL efforts over the course of project implementation, which my colleague Marian will share.
As our projects progress, we seek to continue engagement with local partners and communities on MEL. For instance, as shown in the story in Syria I shared at the start of our presentation, one valuable way to ensure active collaboration with communities where we're working is to use participatory MEL approaches, such as most significant change or outcome mapping. These approaches allow us to not only understand partners or participants' priority results, but empower them to track those results and, in the case of most significant change technique, even tell us which results are most meaningful and why. With the complementary MEL enhancement we provide, our partners gain experience in MEL and can become more independent in implementing effective results-driven programs. We also endeavor to identify collaboration, learning, and adaptation, or CLA, activities that we should engage in with our partners and participants. For example, under USAID-funded programming in Jordan, we paused a line of political party programming that was not leading to its intended results and took stock by seeking input from diverse stakeholders on the ground on how to design more effective interventions. Bringing partners into these opportunities for reflection, learning, and adaptation helps ensure they play an active part in determining the focus of our programs. Finally, when we conduct formal evaluations, we identify opportunities to share takeaways with those who are data sources for the evaluation. For example, we recently held an evaluation debrief session with a local partner working with youth leaders across Europe, and the session inspired them to design indicators that they intend to track moving forward so they can better capture priority results that matter to them. This effort to close the feedback loop is critical to ensuring our evaluation efforts are not extractive and instead are equitable and collaborative.
As we wrap up, we want to leave you with one thing to remember that this experience has taught us. As international development organizations, it's becoming increasingly desirable to substantively engage local partners in our work. But the question remains, how do we ensure that our work with and through these partners meet our demands and community priorities? Ultimately, building equitable partnerships on monitoring, evaluation, and learning is central to achieving this. And this process needs to start from the time a project is being conceptualized and continue throughout the time it ends. Moreover, to achieve meaningful, sustainable change, we must amplify the voices of the people and organizations we work with and empower them to lead the change they want to see. Thank you all.
Thank you both for your wonderful presentation. I know the coin story and the most significant change kind of approach to local mail will be things that stick with me as I move forward. That wraps up our presenters today. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of the individuals who presented today and all the participants who joined. We're very thankful for all the work that our presenters put in and our mentors who volunteered to support them in developing their talks and practicing their presentations. So this was definitely a group effort. We really hope to see you in the future, and please be on the lookout for a recording of this presentation that will be sent around after we adjourn today. So thanks everyone, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Joseph, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. But thank you all.